What is going on, everybody? And in this video, we are giving you a state of the market and stock picks for April 8th, 2022. That sounds like something you're interested in. Consider subscribing as I get you prepared for the day and the week ahead of events, earnings, and what looks good on the charts. So again, consider subscribing if that's something you're interested in. Now let's get straight into state of the market. Nothing has really changed. A lot of people are talking about a flash crash. In my opinion, we had people like Bullard come on today who was just very hawkish. And good majority of what he talks about, he was actually quite dovish because earlier in this week we got other Fed members talking about stopping of asset purchasing, which I don't think is going to happen until the war stops. Because another thing to consider, another thing to keep on your radar is that we're tapping into reserves on a lot of different, when it comes to oil and a lot of different other things, just because of sanctions and everything else, to try to help alleviate inflation at the same time. Now, this could be a big problem. I mean, it's already been brought up by President Biden, that Russia is essentially putting a major constraint on supply. That's just a lot of different things. Oil being a big one of them, but understand that all the sanctions that they're placing on it is essentially playing this cat and mouse game of who's going to give up first is what it's going to be. Is it going to be Russia, or is it going to be the U.S.? And how much oil reserves can you hold on to, or other reserves until the other person runs out? It's essentially what the kind of game we're playing right now, and could be a big issue down the road if it's not resolved quickly. I believe the U.S. might actually take bigger action if we start getting in trouble. By trouble, I mean the fact that we run out of reserves because this war is prolonged way longer than it needs to be. It's concerning because right now we don't really have. We don't see the finish line yet. There's been a lot of talk of peace talks, but I don't think it's going to end anytime soon. So that could be a concern, something to keep on the radar, something we will see in this upcoming earnings. But one thing that was really interesting today that you're not going to see in the news, that you're not going to see anywhere else, but on charts, or reading charts, or reading, you can even read option premiums for this. But ultimately understand that today there was a brief moment. I would say it was probably a 30-minute span within this big green candle that we got towards the end of close today. But there seemed to be a big buy order coming in around that time. This is also when sanctions came out. You got some new sanctions placed on Russia. And that being said, it caused this huge spikes. It seemed like there was a couple different buy orders, because the first time we attempted to spike, we sold off very quickly and it was picked up very quickly. It happened twice, and then after that second pickup, the market just started exploding from that point, because the past 2 days watching these candles, the bounces have been pretty weak for the most part, and then we actually towards the end of the day we filled the gap, which would be interesting because something I want to watch tomorrow. Can we make it above the 45.16? I think will be extremely important tomorrow if we want to continue to try to make the all-time highs. We had the pullback nicely on the index itself, something I talked about. If we get a pullback to here, it would be great. Maybe we decide to chop tomorrow into this wedge and actually break out. And start going into earnings is something I could be looking at. Now, I know a lot of people are talking about flash crash and everything else. You have to go off of what you're seeing in the charts, what's going on in the news, what is new news. And this is why I keep reiterating new news, because if it's not new news, it's not going to affect the market unless you see that affected in earnings. Unless the earnings are actually reporting it, it's not going to make a difference. The market will keep going up. So being said, we do have earnings around the corner. We got banks here coming up, which will be extremely important. That's going to tell us what is going on with sanctions, what's going on with lockdowns, and how dramatic it's affecting these companies. Now, if they're not industry leaders, could really suffer pretty bad moving forward. And in what essentially hasn't eliminated companies, that the pandemic hasn't eliminated, this war and sanctions and inflation might do just that. So it'll be interesting to see how this whole thing unfolds. And going back to inflations, rate raises, and all that, none of that stuff really matters, right? It's about the bond buying. Ultimately, is what the focus is. When that is removed, that's our backstop. If that backstop is removed, it can draw concern, and that's why we started getting some of this initial selling over the past couple of days. Is because of that, because there was threats of removing that backstop. But I think it was a little premeditated because of the fact that there's still a war and we don't know when that's going to end. But we've been given this idea that as soon as it does end, that bonds asset purchasing will be done at that point, and I believe that they will, because I think they would have stopped it during the last meeting. But again, there was a war, so they didn't want to remove that because of that fear, especially just coming out of a pandemic. Now, if we didn't have a pandemic and there was a war going on, obviously they wouldn't do that. But considering our state in general, it needed to be left on for the meantime. So we'll see how this plays out. SPX at a really good level. We still want to hold this 44.82 mark is extremely important in my mind. Again, we can still come down quite a bit and still be bullish, right? I think we would still hit down to the 43.58, still be bullish. I'm really watching this key area here is my low. As long as we're above that, I think we're solid. So that doesn't, not saying we can continue to sell for the next couple of days and then bounce and continue up. But right now, again, I saw a lot of, with the price action I've seen today, it looks like people are ready, that this is the level that might be good. Now, it just depends on how we open overnight. If we do break up over this, I think we can continue running up very quickly. Going into, will we hit all-time highs before earnings? I'm not sure. It really depends on what happens. Again, the market is very sensitive to information right now, so you have to keep that in mind. We may get to a certain point and chop, but I think we can possibly go back to all-time highs fairly quickly. Again, I think if we get solid earnings, could potentially help that when it comes to double rate raises and stuff like that. That's going to bring volatility and a little bit of pullback. Again, that's all lined up perfectly right after big tech earnings, and normally after big tech, the market normally sells off anyway. So it's just a normal rotation. So we'll kind of all play in together nonetheless. But so that's what I'm looking at tomorrow. We definitely want to try to break above this 45.25 tomorrow. If we can break and hold above that, very bullish at that point. If we keep chopping here, we don't want it to break today's lows, essentially, is what we're looking at. So we don't want it to break below this line, essentially 44.50. If we do break below that, I think we're going to start selling off a little bit more. But aside from that, I think we held very well. Again, we filled this gap, so I want to see if we can actually possibly gap up over this tomorrow or not. So I definitely want to see that. Now, as far as Bitcoin, Bitcoin is still solid in my mind. Again, I'm looking at this essentially being here, this 37K essentially being the lower low. Essentially this zone down here. So as long as we can come very close to this and still be considered a lower high. And so that's what I'm kind of watching. We did gap fill this. Still retesting this. We just need a bounce out of this, which I think is very, very close. Again, the Fed are pushing extremely hard for the U.S. to be number one in crypto. So keep that in mind. So I think that with them pushing, with inflation concerns and everything else, I think crypto might be the backstop and why they're pushing so hard for it. So again, just my thesis of what I think is going on. So I do believe this can come down a little bit more, but ultimately I think that again, that 32K or this red zone here, around the 32K is ultimately our new base for Bitcoin. I don't think we see a break below that unless there's something major going on. Again, if something major in the world happens, we have another pandemic, whatever the case is, completely out of left field, completely new, could crash this completely, or there can be some big technical issue that happens with the Fed trying to figure it out. So I have to see how that goes. Now, going into tomorrow, I think the biggest one I've really been watching and really paying attention to is Tesla. Tesla held here. Essentially, the 1040 mark has been very solid. It's held. It hasn't quite filled that gap. It's come really close. I mean, you could potentially say that it's filled the gap already, but I think it's enough for this to continue up. I was really looking for that 1K mark, but it's not going to touch that. It's something I talked about on the daily. Some of these ones like Tesla aren't going to come that close. Now, other ones will actually hit and bounce on the daily, but Tesla very rarely actually tags that daily before it continues to start pushing back up. And so I really like where it is right now, but tomorrow I'm kind of looking at that 1075 mark. Needs to break out of this range. We could potentially just flip-flop this range here from the 1072 to the 1025. So we might continue to rattle between here until next week. Strong possibility. I'm kind of thinking that it will be until we get some real news a real news catalyst to push us out of this. That's what I'm looking at. Shop, again, another big one you want to keep an eye on. It looks like we did break out of the wedge after hours. Don't want to break back below the 644, but could potentially run back up, I think, to 740. Again, you got resistance here at the 675 mark, so just be mindful of that. Could get rejected pretty hard off that. Again, it's the first attempt to try to hit that. If it does break that or does hit that, it's going to get rejected hard. What you really want to watch is to see if it attempts to try to break it the second time or possibly a third time. If it doesn't break the second time on the second attempt, we're probably going to more likely sell off more. UPST is another one. I did grab shares in this. I think this is at a good level. Again, you're on the 200. Anytime you're under the 200 on the daily, it's a good time to buy. Anytime you're under the 200 on the weekly, it's even a better time to buy if you're looking long term. I bought shares in this more for a longer term swing, is what I'm looking at for this. So that's what I am going with there. You also have Google. Google's at a pretty critical level, but there's something I'm talking about is you are at a level, or we're at a spot because of the gap downs. You've had multiple day gap downs. That just means that we're going to get a parabolic move to the upside here in the coming days. But being said, and Google's normally one of the ones to lead. You do have to be very careful because there is a lot of resistance right here. And more likely what's going to happen is if this is going to break this, you're more likely going to gap up over some of these resistances and then a strong push from that point. But until then, you have to be careful. It's rejected a couple different times, so it's good that it's been rejected and not sold off too terribly bad. So in my mind, that's good as long as it can stay within this range here. But we definitely wanted to break back a little over this 2740. If we could break it back over that, I think we could start riding this back, at least back to these pre-levels here before everything started going on for the meeting notes and stuff like that, and the Fed talking about removing the backstop. And I think we can get back up to that level of 28.61 could be a possibility. So, and another big one, I did get an AMD today. I do really like this level, this 100 mark, essentially roughly around here. It's a very strong support. So I'm kind of looking to at least get back to the 110 mark. Potentially, I got it further out for earnings. So I really want to see how this goes. As long as the market sentiment's strong, I think this could potentially start really pushing back up. Again, I like the support here. As long as it doesn't break that, looking again for at least the 110 mark and see how that goes tomorrow. It could be a possibility. So just watch those fields. I think that's a strong play possibly for tomorrow. Trying to think. Cost. Another big thing to understand too is that all the common things that you do each and every day, you're going to always go to Walmart, Target, and you're going to buy stuff. Electrical always has to be paid, right? You have to be fed, you have to be sheltered. Those things are where money is getting flooded into right now because of inflation, because of concerns about everything else that's going on. So you're seeing a lot of money, especially like on things like Costco, where people got to buy food and supplies. So that's why these things are skyrocketing. Could potentially watch this tomorrow and see how it does. You have to be very careful though, because if there's a rotation out of this thing is going to come flying down. And so that's why I don't really, haven't been trading wheats or anything like that, or gold or anything like that during this particular time, because of that fact. If some news comes out that Russia and Ukraine come to terms, there's a ceasefire, peace talks, all the whole 9 yards, uh, stocks like this are going to come crashing down very fast. And so if you're not prepared for that, especially at these high levels already, you're going to be in trouble. So definitely don't FOMO into these things. If you're going to do intraday play and you're watching resistance and very strict on your stop losses, there you could play things like this, but just be mindful of that. But essentially, that's what I got. I don't want to give too many out. I think tomorrow's more of just to feel how the market's going to be, I think is what's important. But that's what I got until the weekly update. Hopefully, we get more information tomorrow, something, at least some kind of market movement to kind of determine where the market wants to go. But with that being said, be mindful. Good luck, and I'll see you guys in the field.